Welcome back. In the previous video, we have seen the data warehouse architecture types. So we have ended up at this stage where we are saying that data warehouse architectures can exist in different ways as a single tier architecture or a multi-tier architecture is a two-tier architecture that is shown in the top of the screen, and it can be a virtual data warehouse directly on by collecting the data from different data sources into another database on which we can perform analysis. This is what we call it as a virtual data warehouse, and this is the one which we have seen, which is a one-tier architecture where we are pulling the data from different sources, performing an ETL operations and trying to load the data into a data warehouse. And this is another approach where you are having by using ETL process, you are trying to accumulate the data from different data sources and trying to build a data warehouse that can have a sub data warehouse, which we are calling it as a min data mart, and try to perform analysis or directly apply the analysis on the data warehouse. This is what we have seen in the previous session. Now in this session, we will be looking into the details of data warehouse components, and one by one we will see what are the functionalities. So from this diagram, we are looking at a very big picture of a data warehouse. So we call this one as a multi-tier architecture, wherein we have in data sources is separated from the data warehouse, and after data warehouse we'll be seeing an OLAP engine which will try to model the data for the analysis purpose, and in the last interface we call it as a front end tools using which we try to get the relevant information by either doing querying or reporting or data mining or some sort of analysis on this data available in the OLAP servers, or might be on directly on the data warehouse. So now let us see what are the steps involved. What do we mean by in the first phase data sources? The various data sources that are associated within an organization, which may include all the operational databases or the data sources coming from other external sources. Like for example, for any organization, customer other information which is not part of the operational database. Say for example, if there is a interface called as a product sales department is there, which would be trying to collect the information regarding the customer to certain extent, some personal information about the customer, but not the detailed information. But if there are certain external sources which can give the customer profile, now we can know what are the other purchases that this particular customer can make from the organization. So they become the external sources. So we have different sources of data from where the data is being extracted into the data warehouse by using a process called as extract, transform, load, which we call it as ETL process. In general, ETL is extract, transform and load. So let us now see what are the implicit steps involved in these two phases. One is a data source and the ETL process. So a data source can be a combination of any of these types. It can be a database, it can be a flat file, or it can be an ERP file, data source, or it can be some operational databases from which your data is coming into, or from a customer resource management. These are all the various sources of the data which can be considered for a data warehouse building. Now, how is this being built into a data warehouse? There is in between the data sources and the data warehouse, there is one process called ETL process, which we call it as extract, transform and load process. So what are the steps involved in ETL process? The steps are data validation. Normally what happens is when the data is considered from different sources, for the purpose of some sort of analysis, what we want to store, is the data is in the proper condition, or is it the satisfying the constraints imposed. All these type of is the data is already existing, and we are again trying to consider that for the for building a data warehouse. Such type of checks will happen with the validation, data validation phase of the ETL process. That means if already the required data is available in the data warehouse, then there is no need of again pulling the data from the different sources. What it can do is it can make use of the existing data warehouse. So such type of validation part is all carried on in the data validation process. Now, once when the data is validated and assumed to be considered into a data warehouse, then there requires a data cleaning phase. What it will do in the data cleaning phase, it tries to look for any discrepancies in the data. Maybe are there any errors in the data? Maybe are there any invalid values in the data? Say for example, if you want to know the age of an employee, the age of an employee can be between 20 to 65 years. But if you have a value like 306 in the age column, so obviously there is an error in the data. It could either be a 30 years or a 36 years, some mistake in typing the data, or trying to, while collecting the data, there might be some sort of error that is being encountered. So such data should be cleaned off, that should be removed off, or it should be properly modified. Otherwise, it will create a wrong analysis. So this type of step, this is a very important phase where you have to remove the irrelevant or inconsistent data from the data considered. Then comes a transformation phase. When data is integrated from different heterogeneous sources, there is a possibility of different representations. So these representations should be bring to some considered format. For example, let us assume a product like an iPhone. Its price in Indian currency could be something around 70,000 rupees. Same product if purchased in US, it is around, say for example, $1,000. To analyze the sales of an Apple phone over the entire world, if we are trying to bring all the data from different data sources or different Apple data sources, then what happens? In certain databases, it will be represented in terms of dollars, and in certain data basis sources, it will be represented in terms of rupees, and in certain data sources, it will be represented in terms of euros. So all of them are different and they different prices. We can't analyze on the price of this, because if you look at Indian currency wise, it is 70,000 as a numeric value, whereas if you look at the American currency, it would be something like 1,000 as a numeric value. And we cannot come to a consistent state unless and until we transform this data into one format, either be in rupees or in dollars. All the rupees to be converted to dollars, all the dollars to be either converted to rupees, vice versa. Any method. We need to have a specific method of transforming related data into some consistent format. So these transformations like this are all taken care by in the data transformation phase of your ETL process. Then comes the data aggregation. Normally what happens is in the data warehouse, we are holding the it's like day-to-day transactions. If we want, we can hold, but most of the time they are irrelevant for the analysis purpose. What is more important is day-wise consolidated data or week-wise consolidated data or branch-wise consolidated data. This is what is more important for any analysis purpose. So for that purpose, we try to apply different aggregations and summarization methods on the data. We try to concise the data by using some concept like a concept hierarchy and all. So now all these type of things are taken or are being processed in this phase of ETL. Then Data loading. This is the phase where it checks for the checking for the integrity constraints or building indexes on the data considered, partitioning the data for improved performance. All of these are taken care in the loading phase of the ETL process. In the next video, we'll be looking at how the rest of the things that are associated with the data warehouse construction. We'll stop the video here.